revolution starting inside. An instrumental part of Agora worldwide. Agora worldwide. Agora worldwide. Counter economics. Agorist strip. Black market click. Move a quick flip. Can't regulate this. Agorist strip. Black market click. Move a quick flip. Can't regulate this. Agorist.
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 Nexus. Agorist.
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 This is Brandon with the Agorist Nexus podcast. I've got the Jeremiah Harding on. How you doing, Jeremiah?
Edgy hedgy as usual. I just got done with a 3.5 hour recording on my channels, so lots of leftover energy to talk about this. And then I'm gonna work out. Gotta stay fit.
Yeah, man, we're kind of doing this episode on the fly just because of the whole Ukraine bombing of the beach. So this is kind of like a surprise episode for us. But I'm glad that we could put together for you guys real quick. But before we get into it, we've got a shout out to our sponsor, Presearch, a decentralized private search engine, badass crypto project in general. Definitely check them out. Use our link for 50 pre-coins. Get away from Google. Google sucks, and Google will just use you to sell your data. So yeah, earn crypto as you search, and everyone's like, well, what about, I don't know, my email, right? And it's like, well, you don't have to sign up to get crypto rewards, but if you do, just use an anonymous email address.
And here's something that can sort of tie in. If anybody has been connected to Agora Spaces for any length of time, you probably have become at least familiar with Proton Mail. And Proton Mail, in Proton Pass, the free version of it, gives you alias mailing addresses, and those aren't connected to your identity in any traceable way. So if you wanted to use Presearch just with a legit identity that would still let you access emails persistently, even for purposes of login, just get Proton Mail. They'll give you an alias that you can just use. I think you're allowed 15 by default. It's part of Proton Pass, their encrypted password manager, and I think we have an affiliate with them. I'm not sure, but yeah, that's an option too.
Yeah, hell yeah. Yeah, and then there's Tutanota you can get too. So, but yeah, there's all kinds of different ways that you can sign up anonymously. And then, Presearch doesn't store your data. They actually, all the node runners, they don't even get your data. All the data is removed before data goes to them. But again, all the searches are decentralized, so it's not in one database any of the other search engines would be. But yeah, let's definitely get into this. So this is very interesting to me because the whole Russian-Ukrainian conflict has been going on for a while. We had a World War III episode a while ago, and if you guys listen to that one, I believe that I was mentioning stuff the U.S. is doing everything that they can to pretty much get involved in this conflict, to basically start World War III. Everything they did in World War I and World War II, they're doing in this conflict. And I think it's very, history kind of repeats itself. So, they're giving aid like they did to the United Kingdom, to Winston Churchill in World War II. They're giving aid in terms of financially, in terms of weapons. They're giving the Ukrainians weapons. I believe there are even American volunteers that signed up on the Ukrainian side. So
for a long time, and a lot of those, it's interesting. A lot of them found out how terribly that these volunteers were being treated, and they tried to fucking leave, and either got the shit beat out of them, or otherwise there were problems, to say the least. So yeah, there's some problems there, certainly. And a lot of these people are using Ukraine as sort of a war tourism kind of thing. There are a lot of people who get into these conflicts for a lot of self-serving reasons, to say the least.
Yeah, to get Twitter, to get followers. I know that there's a couple whores like that, that really just grind my gears. But
Yeah, and like to be clear, it's not like Russia's innocent, but like a lot of the escalations are being done in a deliberate way by the US, who isn't innocent either. So it's like it's one of those situations where like neither party is really awesome. But the US wants you to believe that if you don't support the Ukrainian government, you're fighting on the side against freedom. And that's just it's some of the most propagandistic garbage, as can be seen by this latest happenings. I mean, it's not like, Russia hasn't been targeting civilians, but this one is going to be one of those ones that like they use that as very ample reason to start escalating tensions. So you've got a NBC article about this particular situation, I'm sure.
yeah, yeah. Before we get into the article, do you want to give people just like a quick summary of what has been going down with NATO, the Ukraine, and Russia? Just a quick, just a real quick summary, if you could.
Sure. I mean, the history of this dates really far back. But I can hit some high points. Like I'll do like 10 high points here. That uh since the 50s, the US has been acting on behalf of the Ukrainian government through things like Operation Aerodynamic and Muscular, or Project. I think it was Project. And it's things like that which were directly designed to install people in their government and media, and use those people to instill nationalist fervor against Russia. Um, and those sorts of things only continued later on down the line. Um, and while the US, over time, this will be point two, sort of assisted Nazis in their escape from World War II Germany, some of the Nazis that were given more leniency were Nazis that assisted in the fight against Russia. Um, and Russia was one of the final nails in the coffin of quite a bit of the Nazi regime, a point that they will not soon let America forget. That these alleged commies that are just as bad were, like the ones finally like defeating the Nazis. And there's something to that. It's not saying that like tanky bullshit is gonna fly here, because it's saying that kind of podcast. And anybody who knows me knows that I'm not gonna make excuses for anything Stalin or Lenin did. But it is a valuable thing to note that when the US opposes those people, they're not doing it on ethical grounds. They're doing it on the grounds of escalating tensions and maintaining their war machine by having a boogeyman to point at, who's like not any real worse than the US is, um, to a large degree. Um, and so the US escalated, here's point like four, I guess, tensions by funding the Mujahideen through Operation Cyclone, to the point where they created the modern day terror threat with all of the modern terror cells, Al Qaeda, ISIS, ISIL, Al-Nusra, all of these organizations, the Taliban, were like downshift funnel money from US CIA operations and like training and shit. And the US would continue to antagonize Russia over those years, by like supporting Ukrainian nationalism and actively helping train their troops, actively giving them jobs, actively putting American businesses and business interests in Ukraine, like the biolabs that actually were real, as Newland later admitted. You know, and so like I guess we're up to point seven-ish, that the US and Western powers in general have been doing this weird brinksmanship game with Russia. And I'm not saying that the Cold War in America was justified, to, preface this, because again, if you know me, you know that I don't support what the US was doing with the Cold War. But basically, the run up to the whole Cold War bullshit, like really hitting its peak, was the brinksmanship in putting missiles in Cuba. It was called the Cuban Missile Crisis. Um, And the Cuban Missile Crisis was so bad because who would put missiles that close to our borders? Who would station troops that close to our borders? Russia must be planning something, and we should use that as pretext to like do this brinksmanship war bullshit. The US also used anti-Russian sentiment and, nationalist fervor, even working with some of the domestic Nazis that they helped export to directly compete with Russia in terms of their mind control programs, their missile programs, their NASA programs. I mean, it might as well be NASA, but like the general gist is that they've been working with any unseemly element that they can for the past like century to oppose Russia. No matter how bad it is, no matter what the blowback is. And at this point, like point 9-ish, 10-ish, I don't know. Who's fucking counting? I'm tired. This is, fucking the general vibe is that they put missiles on the border of Russia. They put troops on the border of Russia. In the terms of so many NATO countries, and in terms of one country that was full of Nazis, Ukraine, that the US supported. So I'm not a Ukroid, you know, I'm not a Ruskoid. I think Russia is a piece of shit government run by a fascist, and I don't support them either. Anybody who knows me knows that, like, any government that's willing to ban LGBT people as extremists is going to have my wrath. So I'm not a Putin stan here, but if the US is going to say that it's okay to do brinksmanship and war with Russia and use it as a pretext to work with all these piece of shit people, up to and including directly funding the Taliban and directly funding bin Laden's like soldiers and his camp in Khost, then maybe like they don't have any business uh like with this hypocrisy. If they're willing to work with all of this, like all of these unseemly elements, maybe Russia has reasons to be concerned when they're stacking troops on the border. And one last point, uh, part of the recent kerfuffles is because one of the ways that they had to control Russia is waning in terms of resource management because climate change is melting the ice caps and a significant amount of the downward flow is creating new openings in the area north of Russia and exposing a bunch of natural resources. And that might mean that Russia doesn't have to rely so much on Western support. And it might mean that they can become a very strong global superpower along with BRICS that might compete with NATO. And NATO has gained what they had by the rise of cultural dominance and bullying people in that region. And with the recent crash of the petrodollar arrangement with Saudi Arabia, with the recent damning critiques of the Israeli genocide in Palestine, with a bunch of other shit that's like coming to bear to make the West look like the actual ghoulish people that they are, uh, people are overlooking all of the sins of BRICS in order to say that, you know what, maybe it wouldn't be so bad if these people were the new ones in charge. And that's what's got the West scared. So, with all that being said, Crimea has been a long contested territory in the region, and Russia has, like, for a long time, directly occupied various points in there. And in this particular case, uh, part of the occupation was some people, some normal civilians having a beach day. And that brings us to our present story, which you can take over for a bit now that I'm done spreading my commie propaganda, as the Westerners will probably call it.
Yeah, that was an interesting take, but I just want to add that the recent conflict is actually partially Trump's doing when he put weapons into Ukraine recently. Um,
Absolutely.
but uh, but yeah, and so a lot of people are blaming this on Biden. It's like, well, don't forget about Trump for sure. But
Yeah, especially with the
but
Libertarian Party like sucking up to Trump. That's a real that's we could We could do a whole episode on party art corruption. And I've been talking directly to LP people who are very angry with the way things have been going down. But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. And then NATO's been expanding rapidly in the area, and they wanted to add Ukraine to the list, and Russia said, "Nah, yeah, we're not doing that." So it's kind of like I forget who explains it best, but it's kind of like if Russia were to like start making like alliances with all these like South American countries
Mm-hmm.
that didn't really care for the US that much. And
With
then
valid
like
reason.
yeah, and then like started to like um put weapons into like Mexico and Tijuana and stuff and put troops there and to like have this big buildup. The Americans, the United States definitely wouldn't be very happy about that. And, they would look at it like as in they were being provoked and, rightfully so. But yeah, just like the US had issues with the Cuban Missile Crisis when, Russia was putting missiles into Cuba. So the article that I want to get into is from NBC. It's titled "Russia Blames U.S. for Ukrainian Strikes That Kill at Least Five and Injure Dozens in Crimea." And Russia, so it starts out, and this is by Julian Talmanson. I don't. Um, Russia blamed Washington for deadly strike on strategic port in occupied Crimea on Sunday, claiming U.S. supplied missiles were used in the attack. The strike left at least five people dead, dozens injured, in one of the biggest attacks on the Russian annexed peninsula in recent months. Russia's defense ministry said U.S. provided Army tactical missiles, ATACMS rockets were intercepted over the city of Sevastopol. I probably butchered that, but fragments from the fifth rocket led to numerous casualties among civilians on the ground. And all flight missions for the American rockets. So basically, the U.S. gave them these operational tactical missiles. Are entered by American specialists based on US owned satellite reconnaissance data. So these are not only American rockets that they supplied the Ukrainians, but all the intel is
Mm-hmm.
from the US. The
Yeah.
satellite reconnaissance data. It was I was seeing on something on Twitter that had like US flight data going over
Mm-hmm.
that area too. I don't see that in this article, but I also saw like US flight data as well. And it just like what's going through my head right now is like how did they not know that like there were really like no military targets on this beach? They just like striked, you know, civilians who were uh enjoying the beach with their families and stuff. So it's pretty wild.
Or, and this is my cynical take here, um, a general like vibe could be that like they wanted to like cripple a strategic port and they didn't care like how many civilians died. In fact, that might make the strategic port less useful because people would be less likely to be there um for any reason, like much less like not wanting to be human shields. So it's like it's one of those things where it's like if you want to demoralize people and really cripple their shit, this is a good way to do it. Just kill a bunch of their civilians. So it's and to me, I'm one of those inside jobbers with regard to 9/11. And so the
Yeah.
US like almost certainly had like at least a hand in what happened that day. And if they're willing to do that, then they're willing to do anything. They're directly supporting a genocide of like over 30,000 people as of months ago. It's probably like closer to 40 or 50,000 Palestinians dead by Israeli hands this year. And it's like, if they're willing to support that, what's a few hundred people on a beach? So I would have no doubt that something like this, at very least, could be very deliberate. That they could have been like, yeah, Ukraine, you can go do that. Sure. And just just for the sake of journalistic accuracy, it's not like Russia hasn't been attacking civilian targets. It's not like Russia's hands are clean. But the fact that the US had such direct involvement in this, with seemingly no congressional oversight or approval, that's not, I don't think, legal. And it does amount to a declaration of war, essentially.
There definitely wasn't a declaration of war, but yeah, I mean, think about if like Russia had like intelligence, if they had like gotten the reconnaissance and gave like another country intelligence and then gave them the missiles too,
Hmm.
um, and like and let's say it's like Mexico or whatever, and then Mexico decided to like fire on us, we'd be like, what the fuck, Russia? Like, so um and we'd want to go to war, like naturally, like the US would want to go to war naturally. And a lot of people probably wouldn't even blame us. You know, and that's the crazy thing is that this is a nuclear power we're talking about, so the consequences could be very deadly.
Hmm.
Um, there's a lot going on here, and I think that I'm tired too, so
Yeah.
bear with me. But I think that the consequences here are, you know, extremely damning. I want to say something too, but I think it slipped my mind. But yeah, uh, what else you got, Jeremiah? We'll continue with this article too here.
Yeah, like just in general, the thing is, like, I'm not on either side of this conflict, but um the fact that the US continually supports Ukraine and claims that this is an issue of democracy, while also continually supporting Israel and claiming that's an issue of democracy and a bunch of other shit, and the fact that this is all so intertwined that even while the ICJ is asking for Netanyahu's head on a platter, like give us Netanyahu so we can fry him for war crimes. Um, Nobody's willing to like cooperate with that, obviously. Um, while this like same institution that is protecting people like Netanyahu wants to say that Ukraine is about, human rights and, democracy and shit. Well, maybe, but if it is, then it's not, doing a good job of it. And it's also not a great messenger from the group of people who fucking are supporting genocide now and have supported the deaths of millions of people in that region for, decades. So it's like, it's hard to take it seriously. It's hard to take it seriously when this is the grounds on which we walk, for these people to say that continued support of Ukraine, especially conducting operations like this on a direct level, is anything other than, you know, dick measuring contests for more position and power and profit and shit. So you
Yeah,
got more of the article to read.
yeah, absolutely. The thing too is that like I think World War III is definitely a possibility here. I mean, um, and if that happens, you know, what will what will China do? I think that if the US, if if there is a war here and NATO gets involved, what will China do? I think China will be China will have the perfect opportunity to go into Taiwan and
Hmm.
just take what they've always wanted. And uh, I'll kind of it'll be kind of funny at that point because it's like, well, China always claims that Taiwan is already like China, so like, why do you have to invade them? But that aside, that will put China and Russia in pretty much an alliance against the US and NATO. And
Hmm.
that's pretty, that's a lot of countries. So that's pretty much a world war at that point. Then, you'll add in like North Korea and, and then there's all kinds of entangling alliances that the US is in too. So,
Yeah, and it's like a lot of people are worried about like which countries are joining NATO now. But NATO is getting increasingly unpopular, especially with this like genocide, and a bunch of other shit. It's like, so if NATO is already this unpopular, then I think we should be worried about what kind of countries are going to be like, you know what, I'm going to take this opportunity to solidify an alliance with BRICS. Because if BRICS is the counter NATO and there might be a world war in the region, there might be a whole lot more people than the US expects that they don't have like control over and who have direct reasons to take revenge.
Yeah, absolutely. Now the rest of this article basically just goes over like the Moscow mayor and like some of the like officials. I don't know if you want to get into it. I really kind of don't, but basically they're blaming the U.S. and you know Russia's basically blaming the U.S. for the attacks, and probably rightfully so. So, uh, anything else you want to go over on this article? It looks like three people were killed. They say at least three people were killed and 41 were in. Oh, that was another attack. Um, but yeah, at least five were killed and dozens were injured. So
Well, let me look and see if there's any current information. Because the fact is that a lot of this stuff is sort of just it's ticking, it's ticking along. From what I'm seeing is that four people are died, two of them were kids, and over 150 were injured. Um, and again, I can't stress this enough. Like, I'm not I'm not saying Russia's not attacking any civilian targets, but if the US wants to get directly involved in this conflict, so directly that they're willing to provide intelligence, material, financial, etc. support to these people, then it's very clear that they're like okay if they like even if this doesn't qualify as essentially a declaration of war on its own, or a warlike activity that would spur a declaration of war. Um, if it does spur a declaration of war from Russia, um, like the US is taunting Brits. Things are going to be so much more expensive here if there's no trade with China. Things are going to be much more hostile here if Brazil is activated as a part of their alliance with Russia. Um, Things are going to be a whole lot more difficult to maintain in Israel if India is activated against the West. And so all of these people have this like counter brinksmanship. And this is a very dangerous game these people are playing. Even if it's not nuclear war, um, it's like there's a significant enough risk of any other kind of war that they shouldn't be fucking with it like this. But here they are, fucking with it like this because it might make them power, profit, or position. And they are the biggest empire in history with the most resources of any of them, uh, especially in terms of their total hegemonic power. And like, if they wanted to do this, they wanted to, do this dick measuring contest. Uh, this would be a great way to start, especially since when we talk about hashtag you are the carbon they want to reduce, when we talk about that, yeah, that they could do it by some sort of, jab population control method. They could do it by, some sort of domestic like pollution. They could do it via a variety of methods. But war is one of the all-time best methods for not only reducing populations, but increasing control, and making people much more okay with various tyrannical control methods. And lately, they've been ramping up fucking everything. And everything has been getting worse, and AI is making it way worse. And in general, we have a fascist totalitarian globalism based on a neoliberal framework taking over the world. And if they wanted to instate something, they've got the ample foundation to do so. The garden has been planted, and they just made selective service a breeze conveniently, they just made it automatic if you're in the age range to sign up for selective service, like out of high school. Now it's automatic. Now you don't have to because you have to. So it's convenient that that happened right around that time.
Yeah, and I think they're wanting to sign women or
Yeah.
yeah, sign women in there too, and that's crazy. And yeah, you don't even have to sign up anymore. It's just like you're automatically enrolled when you hit 18, I think. And yeah, this whole situation is like at the very least, this was extremely irresponsible. If
Hmm.
not provocative, trying to provoke or poke at Russia.
Yeah.
Um,
A war
and
crime, either way.
yeah, yeah, exactly. War crime.
That's the reason the US doesn't want to be a part of the ICJ. And their consistent support of Nazis is why even before the invasion, they fucking didn't approve. They were one of the few standouts, along with Ukraine and some others, who didn't who rejected a proposal by Russia to have a UN resolution where they had to reject Nazism. Because of course the US can't reject Nazism. They keep on working with them and they exported them and free speech or whatever. And it's just so many examples of bullshit where like if the US wanted to seem like an evil empire, they wouldn't have to change a damn thing. And if they wanted to seem like a global fascist state bent on lying about, oh, you will own nothing and be happy, yeah, you will. But the people at the top are going to keep making more money and accruing more power and profit than ever. The productivity gap is huge. Inflation is up. You know, the value of the dollar is going to tank if the petrodollar isn't reinstated. Um, so what better time than when the petrodollar starts to lapse to have a conflict suddenly start to spark up in the region that might mean that the US can start supplying Saudi Arabia with a bunch more weapons so that Saudi Arabia can continue its duties as vassal state. Just keep trading in dollars for oil and we'll give you a sweetheart deal so you can continue massacring people in Yemen. It's shit like this. It's one of those things where if you wanted an excuse to be in the region and to have Saudi Arabia and the rest of the petrodollar OPEC affiliated nations, um, you know, still be involved, still be like start a new agreement for a new petrodollar, maybe a CBDC petrodollar, anyone? Um, that if you wanted a war to act as the catalyst for a reset, perhaps a great one, this might be a good way to get that going.
Yeah, absolutely. It would give you a good excuse, like if all these currencies started collapsing that they printed out of nowhere. Um, Now, in terms of like BRICS, I think BRICS is more of like economical and not like militarial, if I
So
remember right.
far,
So I don't think, yeah, so far, but I don't think India would ever join China. I'm not sure they'd join Russia against the West, because India and China do not like each other. There's actually like conflicts.
yeah,
Uh, on their border
long-standing ones.
against each other. Yeah, so I don't. It'll be interesting to see like where India would fall into play. They might be opportunistic and like start going up against Pakistan if the U.S. were like too preoccupied with China and Russia. So
Yeah, and,
that
and
would
of
be
course
very
India's
interesting
a
to see.
yeah. And of course, like India's a massively corrupt nation. Like India's got a laundry list of problems of its own where, hey, if you oppose our government, we'll destroy your house, or we'll bump
Yeah.
off your politician, or we'll whisper away your whistleblower, or Modi is a corrupt piece of shit.
Hmm.
So
I think the elites are very intelligent. Like basically they're like writing history that the way that they want people to see it.
yes.
So when people when the historians write about this time, they'll be like, okay, why was there like so much poverty and why did all these currencies collapse and like why was there depressions all over the place? And it's like, well, you had a plague called COVID, um, you had World War III, you had like all this other stuff that happened, and that's why the currencies collapsed, and that's why we had Great Depressions to basically cover up all of their misdoings and like planned, demolitions. So
Yeah, it's
but
like
yeah,
it's like and that's why we had to institute the global ID system and the CBDC matrix across the globe because we want to prioritize the convenience and safety and stability of your monetary system. And that needs to transcend borders and also place a border of safety around your own house and your contributions to our global community. Shit like that, where they're like, oh yeah, this is, we're eliminating poverty. There's so much less disease. Communication is everywhere. It's
yeah,
everywhere. We're
you
watching
no
you
longer have to be
everywhere.
afraid. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
And so it's like they've got all this stuff that they can ramp up now. It's fucking it's one of those things. Like if you wanted to make like a fucking like dystopian terror state based on technocratic fascism, you would have little to do that would be different. So,
Yeah,
yeah, it's
absolutely.
one of those things. Like we are heading for very dark times, very dark times. And, plenty more episodes of this coming up where we'll talk about lots of that. But like the general like this attack, it's like the kind of pretext that everybody needed for this shit to get kicked off. So if it does, I guess congratulations, we did it. We got potentially a World War III.
Yeah, I don't really have anything else to cover on this. Do you?
I just think people should like always and forever remember that we are dealing with a fascist state, and global fascism relies on people's ability to consistently otherize. In the coming times, remember, there are normal people fucking everywhere. There are normal people everywhere. And humanizing the enemy is the first step to recognizing peace enough that we can maybe have that as a world. But we can't do that if like Russia and Ukraine are consistently calling each other various dehumanizing things, and we can't have that if we're domestically trying to reduce each other to the least possible things so that we can justify action against each other. And as long as the elites can keep us pitted against each other, we're fucked. We got nothing.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
try
I
to
think
try
that's
to
a
remember that your humanity.
mhm. Yeah,
So
well, I'm tired. I'm ready to sign off, but yeah, I'm glad that we could definitely do this.
uh,
I've got a quote here if you're ready to go, Jeremiah.
go for it.
There can be only one permanent revolution, a moral one, the regeneration of the inner man. How is this revolution to take place? Nobody knows how it will take place in humanity, but every man feels it clearly in himself. And yet, in our world, everybody thinks of changing humanity, and nobody thinks of changing himself. That's Leo Tolstoy. Agorist Nexus out.
I'm plugged into the Agorist Nexus. We need the whole community connected. We're the alternative collective. Self-sufficient and effective. Pull the rug from